as you correctly stated, we're within 50 individuals of being sold out at the Branson Mansion this coming September 14th, 15th, and 16th. Now, for those of you that can attend, this is a once-in-a-lifetime presentation. It's the biggest, I would say, conference on transhumanism and hybrids that has ever been undertaken. And I believe, and I've said this on the radio and on different Skype interviews, that I sense in my spirit after this conference, all hell breaks loose in all realms. Now, why is it important to teach people, especially people going, I don't even know about transhumanism, I don't even care about AI, I don't even care about hybrids? It's because all of these things lead to the extinction of the human race. The hatred that Satan has for God's creation when he created mankind in his image and likeness, only to be tampered with genetically by the fallen angels having sex, that's the, if you will, the root of evil. But the fruit of evil, AI, I don't know if you saw this story the other day, Dave, but the AI, the technocrats want to create an AI, all-knowing God that everybody will worship. Well, that's giving power under the image of the beast. So we're excited about Branson. For those who can't attend, especially those overseas, everything you can live stream, and we have to know ahead of time, at least a week ahead of time. It's first come, first serve, and I get yelled at because I can't control the bandwidth. We buy it in specific, if you will, increments. So if you want to, I say, be on the cutting edge of transhumanism, AI, hybrids, the whole thing. And a hybrid, we're talking about combining animal-human DNA. We're talking about the very stuff that mythology was basically built upon. We're talking about the period of time in the Golden Age when those who practiced this died. And the thing that's, they died because they got into, God judged it. So the very same thing, not just Sodom and Gomorrah and how we're following in their footsteps, but the mixing of transgenic, meaning across DNA species line now, is the most problematic issue. You have kids. I don't know if you have grandkids. I'm a grandfather. And the thing is that it's their future. And I'm calling on everybody that has 7-figure, 8-figure, and 9-figure net worth to get behind this, because you've worked all your life, you've built it or whatever, built upon it, and now your children and grandchildren, who would be your natural inheritors in the future, they're facing extinction. The whole human race is facing extinction. You've quoted all the industrialists, the globalists, and different kings and different power brokers saying that, Prince Philip said he'd like to come back as a virus and destroy whatever percentage of the population. The thing is, we know biblically 2/3 of the world's population is going to die. And as things are accelerating, Dave, we want the people who are honest. And by the way, we've got two of some pretty interesting, forgive me, we got 6 or 7 speakers, but one of them is Hugo de Garis, who wrote the book, The Artilect Wars. And Artilect is artificial intellect. And one of the key scientists in the world who's developing artificial brains. And he's worried. He's talking about gigadeath, he's talking about gigabytes, and he's talking about who wins the war, the robots or humans. I will tell you, the final command that robots will have is to kill all humans. We've got Google literally becoming Skynet. And that's why my book, and by the way, I want to tell people the feedback I'm getting from my new book, Terminated, the End of the Human Race, or the End of Man, is so important because it lays it all out step by step by step. And the feedback I've gotten has just been spectacular. And also people are saying, thank you. I didn't understand how all the dead scientists, I didn't understand how all the dead naturopaths, I didn't understand how all this stuff links to the very point of the desire to kill all human beings. And I want to make it clear, all, A-L-L, whether it's Ray Kurzweil and his goal for singularity and eternal life, whether it's some of the most outspoken transhumanists, Sultan Isman, who basically said, and I quote him all the time, that at the heart of the matter, transhumanists want to live forever. We're right back to the Garden of Eden. Ye shall not surely die. Ye shall be as God, knowing both good and evil. So, well, AI, and people call it artificial intelligence, I call it Antichrist intelligence. The idea simply is this, that machines that people think will have mathematical formulas, algorithms, and source code are already indicating signs of becoming demon-possessed. A demon is a disembodied spirit all over the world. It's not a Christian concept. The Bible defined it, but all over the world there are taboos, there are cultural interactions with evil spirits and good spirits. So this is something that people have got to understand. And my talk at the conference will be specifically on the coming demon-possessed machines and the future of this. And Dave, it's bleak. It's accelerating at beyond, and you and I will talk about this, but it's beyond light speed, and I call them AKMs, autonomous killing machines. And I posted a story, and you see that DARPA is at the head of this, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and they're also at the head. They're taking the lead, Dave, on super soldiers. So one of the bylines on my new DVD, which is important, we should talk about that a little bit because we're going to talk about Mount Graham in Arizona and the Grand Canyon finds. The advanced technology of the ancients is now being brought forth into our present age. But again, DARPA is looking for ancient technology they can integrate into today's technology or future technology. And you know what? It goes into a supernatural form of killing. I'm defining the word supernatural as beyond the natural. It's not just guns and bullets. It's not even laser beams, but it's targeting specific individuals with specific DNA-centered weaponry. So this is critical. But what you just described is absolutely what we're seeing. We've seen movies, for instance, where they've got a hunter-killer like flying drones that basically possess all the facilities and faculties that you're just describing, and they're already in existence. So with every measure, you have a countermeasure. With every countermeasure, you have multiple countermeasures. And this thing doesn't stop. And Jesus said, if he didn't shorten the days for the elect's sake, his followers, that there'd be no flesh left alive. And it's already in our face. It's already in our face, Dave. They want to do away with human beings. They want to absorb everything that will yield their power unto them. In other words, give into the beast system, the Antichrist system. They want to absorb it into a global hive, HIVE. Yes, it's all. They can go on Gen6, GENSIX.com, Gen6.com, and they can go down and they can sign up for I think there's 50 tickets available, admission tickets, and then after, my guess is by the end of the week, first of next week, they'll all be sold out. And we have a limit. I got yelled at, Dave, last year because I didn't have a bigger venue. Well, it's the biggest venue we can get in Branson, Missouri. And, in essence, there's no bigger venue. So by live streaming, and then if people sign up for live streaming now, they can basically stream last year's conference for free. So they just go on GENSIX.com, and they'll see a place where it says sign up on live streaming, right-hand side of the page. And we had people, I think, from, 45, 65 different nations. I get those numbers confused simply because at one point it was 45, then I think it up to 65 in the last week. But we had people there physically from 14 different countries. People came from Australia. People came from Germany. People came from Norway. And this is important. See, God will do nothing, and the Bible says this. He's going to warn his people. But if God's people reject his warning, then unfortunately they suffer the consequences. It's the same reason you write what you write. It's the same reason I write what I write. It's the same reason all of us on talk radio and the alternative media, we're trying to tell people what awaits them, and it's not a good thing. So again, GENSIX.com, and they can sign up for live streaming because that's going to be the best way. And when you sign up for live streaming, if you can't make a session in real time, you can always download the session and listen to it, watch it at your leisure. This year is going to be different. We've commissioned Mark Patrick, one of the finest anatomical sculptors in the world. He's got a 13-foot giant there. Okay, now this is important. Giants directly linked to transhumanism and hybrid, because the giants of biblical antiquity were the first hybrids that were identified when the fallen angels, this is what the Bible says, came to earth, had sex with earth women, humans and produce a range of and a different range of different sized beings, and they were called demigods. The Bible calls them Rephaim. The word Nephilim, which everybody throws away, not throws away, they throw that term around as if a Nephilim is a demon, a Nephilim is a fallen angel, and a Nephilim is a giant. That's not true. You know, it's the progeny of the Nephilim that became the Rephaim, the giants. Now, why is that important? Because, again, the genetic manipulation of the human genome is going on specifically right now with the sole purpose of identifying human beings that might have the slightest trace of fallen angel DNA. The Human Genome Project was never just about the human genome. It was specifically about identifying those children of the fallen angels so that they can reanimate them. The Bible teaches that when an unclean spirit, a demon, let me tell you what a demon is, and I'm not going to argue with people. The Bible talks about a demon being as an unclean spirit, a disembodied spirit, and Jesus even taught when he cast the demons out of the Gadarene demoniac that the demons go and look for another habitation. So the fallen angels, which produced the giants, when the giants died, that spirit became a demon. Those demons want to be reanimated into the bodies they originally possessed. In other words, the giants were wiped out, and that they know that the day would come through, obviously, the power of Lucifer, that their children will be reunited with them. So that's a pretty tall measure, because in the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah 13, it basically states that giants are coming. Behold, I send them. God's saying that he's going to send the giants to fulfill his wrath on earth. Now, why is that? Because humanity, especially DARPA and all the different scientific protocols of the world, are basically using genetic engineering and genetic enhancement. We heard, months ago that now they've got a artificial skin that's 200 times stronger than a human. Gee, you want to guess where that came from? We're talking about all of the movies on super soldiers. I think the first one was Van Damme in the super soldier episode, but what was interesting in that is that Hollywood, and we'll talk about this, Dave, Hollywood has been telegraphing every single, I would call, future step in all the movies they break, and this would be a great time for you to share that, the individual, not by name, but that you had with SG-1.
Yeah, the TV show SG-1 had a 10-year run. And I have to confess, I've been watching some of the reruns, and they're replaying it. I forget the name of the channel now. And all I do is look for the science. And they have a character in there named Major Carter that spews out this level of physics explanations where she sounds like she is a professor of quantum physics at a top-level university. So I had a chance encounter with someone who was on the production side of this show, and we were sharing things back and forth, and I told him about my father's work in what I call the secret space program at the time, because that stuff did not go to NASA. And so he really kind of opened up with me. He just said, you really can't quote me, Dave, but he said, I will validate a lot of what you said. And he said, not only is there a Stargate, and certain people wanted this story told, and they had a script that they were ordered to follow, right to the very beings that they would encounter in the show, and they'd have the Stargate SG-1 team fight against these beings. He said, we were told all this. And let me, Steve, go back to something you said that I think is absolutely fascinating. The very first enemies that the Stargate people fought against on the TV show were these people called the Goa'uld. And what they were humans that were implanted with these evil, symbiotic, whatever they be, and they take over the host. And you just said something that really caught my attention. You said the demons wanted to return to the original host. And I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yes, we are. And, Dave, you and I were speaking shortly before we went on the air that about this incident when Tom Horn and I and Timothy Alvarino were in the desert Southwest meeting with Native American elders and Zuni elders and Pueblo elders. They talk routinely about the Stargates, and they talk about meeting on different occasions to open up the Stargates And what's fascinating is that these are their words, that the giants appear as if in a watery mirror and tell them the time of their soon return is upon us. They actually warned the Native American elders about, which they passed on to their different tribes people. They warned them about 9/11 before it happened. So what's happening, Dave, is everybody is getting ready for the big play. And here's something else I want to claim, or not claim, but share with everyone. The idea of stargates has been broached by the father of stealth technology, who was Ben Rich, and he was the second director of Lockheed Skunk Works from the years 1975 to 1991. And I'm quoting him now, okay? He said, "We already have the means to travel amongst the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out for the benefit of mankind. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. We now have the technology," here's the famous statement, "to take ET home. No, it won't take someone's lifetime to do it. There is an error in the equations. We know what it is. We now have the capability to travel to the stars." And then he goes on to say, there are two types of UFOs, the ones we build and the ones they build. Mm-hmm. You and I on your show have talked at great detail on Dr. Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberth, who said it's not that I'm paraphrasing, it's not that we Germans were smarter than than the Allies or than the Americans, but we had help from the outside. One of the things, and I'll share this. I haven't said this, but I will share it now. Before Greg Evenson passed away, days before he went to be with Jesus, he and I were talking about Mars, and he told me something astonishing. And Greg was a former state trooper. He was also, in a clandestine form of the military, but he was also in Space Command. So when Donald Trump says he's going to have a new Space Command, good night. That's been around since, the 60s.
Yes, it has.
And it truly has. So the point that I want to share with everybody, one of Greg's last statements to me. Now understand, he knew he didn't have long, so he wanted to share a couple things. And I'll share this with you, Dave. He made the statement that he was taken in a faster-than-light ship and shown something that I believe he called Altair 1. And one of Greg's relatives was basically personal friends with Dr. Werner von Braun and absolutely verified that story. Now, will people believe me on your show, my show? No. But if those of you who are honest saying, now, why would they come up with a show called SG-1 Stargate? By the way, that was one of my favorite movies of all time. It was wonderfully done. But if you notice the ties now between the Egyptian theme and Stargate 1, now they're having all these antiquities found in Egypt, and now we're hearing that pyramids are absolutely if you will, an energy storage medium to basically be able to project energy. And then, ladies and gentlemen, today, which is whenever this plays, I just sent Dave Hodges a radar screenshot sent to me by one of my listeners of what's going on in the Mount Graham area. Mount Graham, as Tom Horn details at great length, was one of the holiest, foremost sacred sites in all of the United States. It is a known stargate. It is also where the Roman Catholic Church built their observatory. So, Dave, explain to the people what you see before your eyes, because you have some interesting things to say. You broke the article about a mall literally between the beam angle, and that's what you call the beam angle. In essence, such a great energy force was being aimed at Mount Graham. The only answer that I can come up with is that someone's trying to open the gate on Mount Graham.
Well, that's a data trail, and I have talked to people. Let's go back to just one of the people on the production side of the TV show, Stargate SG-1. We talked about this. I was at a conference in 1997, and people say, Dave, you didn't get in the media until about 2004, 2005, and that's true. But let's put it this way, I'm listening to Art Bell for the very first time in 1993, and Vance Davis, formerly the NSA, was on there, and he was talking about the secret space program, and I go, oh my gosh, he's saying exactly what my dad told me before he died. So I reached out and eventually got a hold of him. Then I met Bill Pollock, formerly of the CIA and Air Force Intel, and I was invited to these conferences to share what I knew, and we all had non-disclosure agreements and so forth. So long story short, I was shown a data stream from that was running through space to infinity that was emanating from the Earth. And I said, "What in the world is that? Is that a weapon?" And they go, "No, that is what we call a Stargate data stream." And it appears as a trail of light when something is being transported into hyperspace, because it gets out into near Earth orbit and it jumps into hyperspace, is what I was told. It's fantastic. And what I'm looking here at with what you sent me, and I'm going to be publishing this when our interview goes live on my website, that this particular map does emanate all, let's put it this way, all roads lead to Mount Graham. That's what I'm seeing here in this. And this is a data stream that to me shows Stargate activity.
And this is also interesting because when the giants who are summoned by the Native American elders, by the way, you know what they call their society? It couldn't be any plainer. They call it the Giant Society.
Yeah, I've heard
And
that.
and so the thing is, now they did not take us to them. I would have, given anything to be taken to one of those. Now, probably not taken through one of those, but the point is that we couldn't get them to do it because in their mind it's sacred. So I asked one of the most famous ones. I said, "Why, when these were the people that literally ate you out of existence, devoured you, would you even think of listening to them and wanting them to come back?" Because I said, your myths and legends all tell you that they're cannibals, and they destroyed the Anasazi, they destroyed the Pueblo people, they destroyed the Sand Canyon populations. And by the way, when you go to Chaco Canyon and you go to some of these giant Pueblo dwellings, I mean, these things were some of the biggest civilizations in North America that are astronomical. And when I say astronomical, even their kivas, their circular pits where they get together, they sit around and they open up like a stargate in the floor and communicate with these spirits, they're all astronomically aligned the same way the pyramids are. And I believe for the first time in 2,400, and I'm off a few years, but 2,400 years, the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the other two pyramids, what is it, Khafre and or Khufu and Menkaure, okay, the three pyramids, the Great Pyramid and then the other two lesser pyramids, they're lined up in the same position as they were 2,400 years ago. So, and I want to share something. I produced a DVD that I want everybody to see. It is the most astonishing DVD that's ever been done on the Smithsonian cover-up. The idea of the giants coming to the Americas and the giants and the Egyptians coming to America and others coming to America 235 BC and the technology that came with them. If the Grand Canyon, Dave, every single major landform has an Egyptian name. And where did those come from? Some guy in the National Park Service who went to India? No. These names go back to the legends of the ones who came from the east in their longboats. Remember, the Grand Canyon as we see it today is not the same water level as it was, basically 2,200 years ago, because you've got the different strata, the different sediment levels that you can see the different water lines, just like the great pyramids in Giza, but also the Sphinx. So all of the Egyptian stuff is coming into the forefront again. So in my new DVD, go on my website, stevequayle.com, I talk about the Egyptian presence in the Grand Canyon, the Pacific Rim, and the Great Smithsonian cover-up. For the first time in history, the Smithsonian has denied all these years, close to 150 years, that there were any such thing as giants. I have an eyewitness on the tape talking about he was taken into the, if you will, the underground warehouse complex out of Washington, D.C., 100 yards long with 4 floors deep, or 4 different levels, and intersecting hallways going off of each of that annexed off, and basically 100 yards each too. He was showing the Egyptian artifacts taken from the Grand Canyon. He was showing the Egyptian artifacts taken, mummies taken from the Grand Canyon. He was observing a scientific procedure going on one of the the mummies that was in a CAT scanner, and he asked about it, and the person that was his guide basically made the statement, well, we allow certain people with the correct security clearances into this level to do scientific experiments, but when they're done, then you're going to love this. You're going to when we're done with allowing the scientists to do what they're doing, then the mummies are taken back to the Grand Canyon. Now, that sounds really hard for most people to believe, but the story that led up to him being welcomed in the Grand Canyon, you can look it up. Dr. Troy Payway, P-E-W-E, was the head geologist who set up the geology department at Arizona State University. He used to take graduate students down the Grand Canyon yearly. He was allowed access into areas where no other people were. And for the record, 95% of the Grand Canyon, according to what I've been told, even the Native American elders say this is off limits. So when people, they'll talk about the Kincaid Cave, but Dr. Payway's graduate students asked him, why are all these landforms in the Grand Canyon, why are they named with Egyptian names? And he simply said this, because of some interesting artifacts that were found there. Well, I can tell you point blank that his brain, his literal brain, lies right next to John Wesley Powell's in the Smithsonian. And people have got to get this. Now, why is this critical? The reason they're covering up the presence of giants is because it underscores the biblical narrative. It talks about, obviously, heavenly beings, which is biblical, coming and having sex with earth women and producing human beings, and they produce a race of giants. People will counter that saying, well, in the Bible, Jesus said there is no marriage in heaven. But then in heaven there is in the angels in heaven where they're neither given or taken in marriage. So that's in heaven. The word fallen means to leave that estate. Jude talks about the angels which kept not their estate. And unfortunately, people have a really hard time in understanding that with supernatural power, the fallen angels, and they always assume that fallen angels were giants. No, but the combination of the supernatural genetic material of the fallen angels combining with the human DNA produced a race of super beings that built so many of these unusual megaplexes, the megalithic monuments in the world. And now, every day, even on Matt Drudge, now we've got one of the treasure hunters from the History Channel saying he found an alien, an alien, some kind of a ship in all of his Gordon Cooper studies. I don't know if you've watched that show, Cooper's Treasure. But so it's coming out, Dave. So this is why, again, I want people to understand. I want them to go to my website, stevequayle.com, and I want them to take a look at I'm going there right now, Forbidden History Revealed. And the Forbidden History Revealed is the name of this DVD series. We still have the True Legends, but it's important for people to understand this. And why is the DNA of giant mummies and giant skeletons being extracted by the militaries of the world? And I said this, will the giants of yesterday become the super soldiers of tomorrow? And I have eyewitness testimony of being in the secret labs where they've seen half human, half animal hybrids like the island of Dr. Moreau. And again, this is the first time in history. I can't tell people. They need to hear it. We blurred the guy's face. We blurred actually modulated his voice. But the point is, it's the first time in history, Dave, an eyewitness account of the fact that Egyptian artifacts and giant skeletons were taken from the Grand Canyon and stored in the secret underground Smithsonian warehouse. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, the people that are the people that are purchasing that DVD, look, I'm not pitching the DVD. I have huge expenses to produce these things. Dave, we went from Scottsdale, Arizona, all the way up to Page, Arizona. We went into New Mexico. We kind of did a giant loop. We covered 1,000 miles in one day from sunup to sundown. Actually, it was dark when we came back into the Scottsdale airport. And with our camera system, our Cineflex camera system, and what we give the viewer of this DVD is something that has never been done before. So listen, we try and do what we can as how should I say this, as carefully as we can, but we're not allowed. I asked my helicopter pilot, and I said to him, so what happens if we just go below the canyon rim? He said they will literally dispatch fighter planes from the closest airport, and they'll order us out, and if we don't get out, they'll shoot us down. Now,
Really?
this is a big-time helicopter pilot. And for the record, I don't know, did I ever tell you this? The last time I was at the Grand Canyon talking about giants on coast to coast, and I think it was with George Norrie. My wife and I are in the off season. We're on the North Rim, and the thing that's fascinating is a F-16 flies over the parking lot I'm at. Okay, now understand this is a no-fly zone. The military can do what they want, but no-fly zone for the civilians. And he circles on a tight bank twice. Okay, and my wife said, well, why is he so low? And I looked at her and I said, well, you may not want to believe it, but it's because of who's here, and that's me. And I don't think of myself as being important, but I think they thought that I'd better get the message that this is off limits to you, and that literally happened. Now, why would that happen? Obviously, they send a message. And I don't know, Dave, if you've ever had the privilege of having a Predator drone over you at 100 feet that's armed, but I have.
Not that I
And
know of.
interesting, yeah, and God knows you don't want it, but they made it clear they wanted me to see it. So I thank the people. I thank every praying Christian that prays for my safety and Dave's safety and Alex Jones' safety. And let me share this, and Doug Hagman's safety and all those who are in alt media. I'm not saying those are the only names. And by the way, Sheila Zelinsky's new book, Technogeddon, is coming out, and it'll be at Branson, I believe. And it's true. It is a technological Armageddon. So what I'm going to try and show everybody is the supernatural evil has now impregnated, that's a good word, the whole world of artificial intelligence, of the nanobots, of the idea that there is a spirituality. And one day I was praying, and I feel, and I said this publicly, I felt the Lord said specifically to me, Steve, you cannot separate spirituality and technology. The one leads to the other. Well, obviously we know in the book of Enoch that all this civilization, this advanced civilization, advanced math, energy forms, stargates, all this stuff existed before the flood. And people think that when you talk about the days of Noah, you're just talking about everybody was perverted and crazy. That's not the whole picture. And why this is relevant, it's called the law of first mention. If it is mentioned in Genesis, it's going to appear throughout the rest of the Word of God. But people who say, well, I'm not a Christian, I like to hear you talk about, Steve, all this ancient stuff, but I don't like this stuff you talk about Jesus. My answer to all those people, even listening to your show, who do you think taught me what I know? And some of the stuff I know could not come from mankind. It's because of God's love for his creation, Dave. And Jesus said if he didn't shorten the days, there'd be no flesh left alive. In other words, there will be no humans. And that's why I'm calling people to step up to the pump and prayerfully and through passion understand that this is a big deal. This isn't some, I get all these emails that, oh, this is just a whim you're on. Why don't you preach salvation? I said, I am preaching salvation. For the record, I've been on talk radio for 25 years, and I don't believe anybody has preached Jesus more than I, by name, and because of my calling is to warn the people of God of what the end times are going to be like. So when I talked about sex robots, that didn't go over well, and now sex robots are another extinction level encounter. ELEs or Ls used to be called extinction level events. Now we have extinction level encounters, and what it's going to do, Dave, is obviously it's going to put off procreation, and so the human race will die out, and the human race is being manipulated out of existence, and in its place will be laboratory-produced hybrids, and those hybrids will not be eligible for salvation, but the devil is trying to mimic God and create a whole world of his entities that will basically do his bidding. And I can tell you this, there's no way to describe a hell like that would be on earth.
I remember when you first talked about the giants in our military special forces that were trying to fight against them. I think it might have been in Afghanistan. I don't remember the location,
Yes.
but you talked about how hard they were to defeat. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, first of all, The story came to me from a pilot who had flown a dead giant out of Bagram Air Force Base. I want to make it clear the Kandahar giant that L.A. Marzulli was briefed on was a different time and a different place. I talked to one of his sources, and when they were training to go after these things, and this is what's interesting, the stories lined up of different giants being killed. Now remember, Afghanistan has some of the biggest cave complexes in the world, and our military was searching those cave complexes for the Taliban and for the the resistance that was hiding out in the caves. But the story that I was told by the pilot, I referred to him as the pilot, and by the way, you may have heard him. I actually had him on Coast to Coast with George Norrie, and he was talking about the story that he was told by the guys that delivered the giant's body to, he's a C-130 pilot, an ex-C-130 pilot, and that a special forces team had gone into the cave region, and because they were not equipped with the correct equipment, the giant that came out of the cave basically destroyed them all, ate them, devoured them, and that the guys that went on to finally kill the giant went in and basically saw human remains all over the place. The locals had warned warned our soldiers that these things really exist. And so the gentleman that flew the dead giant out of Bagram, by the way, you're going to love where it went. It went to Ramstein Air Force Base, and then it went to Wright-Patterson Base,
Yeah.
okay?
Yep.
And then the other story that L.A. talks to, and I talked to the shooter, they were told that they have to aim much higher, and they all were to have M79 grenade launchers on their, either M79 grenade launcher or a 79 grenade launcher that was under their assault rifles. They had to increase the caliber, but they were told specifically, you must blow the head off. Now, this becomes important. The soldier that was trained and was present when they took down one of these giants said, "Sir, why is that? I mean, that's not normal. These guys go down." He said, he basically was rebuked and said, "This is something that you're going to have to learn to do." The reason they had to take the head of the giant off is because of the supernatural ability to regenerate, okay? There was actually a movie with Sean Connery years ago called The Green Man. And if people will do a little Bible study, they'll remember that not only did David slay Goliath, but he cut his head off. And the generals I've talked to and the guys that I have talked to over the years, well, I got to say this, they all have the same story. And the ability to regenerate is why they're being incorporated into the DNA, the life force. And Dave, this is something I want people to understand. This is not a human life force. It's not Andre the Giant or any of the Robert Wadlow or any of these people that were big in our generation. This is a supernatural life force. And that life force was what gave them the strength, the prowess, and all the stories you hear in mythology and legends. And by the way, on my website today, stevequayle.com, I posted the story, I don't know if you've seen it, about the giant city in India that was built by the giants. They show the footprint, and they show the size of the carvings, and then the guys, and he's an Indian from India, talking about how big these things are and what size it would take for people to build these. Well, these aren't normal people. It doesn't matter if you go to the Ural Mountains, it doesn't matter in Russia, Siberia, it doesn't matter, all over the world. In every place, on some of the most remote places of the world, you have giant structures, giant megalithic constructs that are humanly impossible to even deal with. And it like when we went to Machu Picchu and we went to Sacsayhuaman, we took a tour down there. That's what we incorporate in some of our films. The thing that was astonishing to people that viewed that stuff is just the size and the fit of these stones. You don't move 300-ton stones with a bunch of donkeys and wood. You know, it just isn't done.
No, that's exactly right. Now, look at the whole construction of the pyramids doesn't make sense. Several tons of stones piled on bigger stones with a margin of error in the construction of 1/200th of an inch. We can't do that with a single family house. And I read something from John Anthony West once, Steve, about the construction of the pyramids. He said for them to have hoisted those stones the way they did, the fulcrum would have had to have been a mile and a half long, and you would have needed over 1 million slaves, and there weren't even 1 million people in the Nile River Valley at that time. And then Here's one more thing that knocks out the Egyptians as the creators. There's water erosion on the Sphinx and the pyramids, and there's been 3 repairs. Climatologists tell us the last time that there was enough water in that valley to do that damage that high up was during the last ice age.
Well, and I concur with that. Robert Schock has also covered that. Schock. He's a guy that he's a geologist and a very very credentialed geologist. But again, Dave, the thing that's fascinating to me is, and it's amazing, and this is being ahead of time. When I wrote the book Empire Beneath the Ice, and I said the next thing that's going to hit the headlines will be Mars, people said, nah, there's no connection. Now there's connection. Now
Yeah.
they're even talking about the meteorites. So again, the thing that's more than fascinating is at our Air Force Base in Greenland. I don't know if you talked about this on any of your previous shows, but at the Air Force Base in Greenland called Thule, it's one of the biggest underground bases in the world. And something that was going, I believe they said Mach 74, exploded. Now, and one of the spokesmen for the Air Force, they originally wouldn't talk about it, and then they said, well, it's a meteor. He basically said, well, it wasn't Russians because we're all here. Well, I don't believe it was Russians at all. I believe it was another source. It was if you will, it had to be alien, or it had to be someone conspiring with the aliens, because again, that would have been a big deal. Had that hit, that would have triggered World War III.
Tell me how that would have triggered the war.
Simply this: the protocols for retaliation. By the way, I want to put everybody on notice. Vladimir Putin's on record multiple times as saying he learned his lesson from history. Russia reserves the right to launch a first strike if they believe they're in danger, okay? What you think of and I think of is just the air base that is above ground that we see. We see C-130s parked on a parking lot and hangars and a lot of ice and snow. But it's never what you see on top the ground. It's always what's underneath. So there are people that claim that that's one of the biggest, if you will, laboratories in the world for alien hybrids. Now, do you see the relevance?
Yes, absolutely.
And so, again, they brought it up. Well, it's a good thing we're still here, or they were intimidating, again, or not intimidating, forgive me. They're being intimidated, but they were, what's it called? Good night. They're intimating that, if it had been the Russians, they wouldn't be there. But the first thing the Air Force did was to say nothing. Then they just threw it out as a meteor. But when you're talking Mach 74, you're talking pretty fast. You're talking, what, 50,000 miles an hour?
Yeah, for terrestrial speed, that's incredible.
That is incredible. But again, here's what I tell people: always consider beyond the vapor stream or whatever. Always consider trajectory. Okay, trajectory tells you more than they want you to know. If something's coming from, let's say you're looking at a clock face, and it's coming into the 9 o'clock position from the 1 p.m. position, there's something above that that has to be sending it down. And for the record, there were no known meteors or anything expected. So what we're involved in now, Dave, and what's coming into our presence is this ain't business as usual. And I've told people, forget the word normal. Nothing will be normal. It doesn't matter if it's the weather, it doesn't matter if it's the economy, it doesn't matter if it's the political climate, it doesn't matter. And by the way, everyone, even if you don't like me, you don't like Dave, you'd better fight for our ability to stay on the air, or Alex. There are some talk show hosts out there, I won't name them, that have taken on Alex, and and because I haven't talked to them face to face, I would say this: it is the most counterproductive, cowardly, jealous thing that I've ever seen anybody do. One host went on record as stating that don't have anything to do with Alex; he'll get you in trouble. Well, good night. This guy's claiming that World War III is upon us and everything else. So, and by the way, he cut himself off from me, Pastor Langford, and others. So, it wasn't us that were causing any first blood, so to speak. Those of you on talk radio and with internet blogs, quit fighting. And I'll tell you what, the world, whether you like me or like Alex or like Dave, and Dave gets people complaining to him about me and vice versa, and we all get people complaining. But cowards sit behind nameless entities on YouTube. And do you guys understand that this is propaganda? Do you understand they have to kill the truth? Do you understand that if the First Amendment goes, do you understand that you go too? When they kill free speech, it follows up with killing the people that they were concerned about silencing. We have seen that in every takeover in the history of the world. That's why in the old days they used to cut their tongues out. Now these days, Dave, they just cut the YouTube feeds off.
Well, I've said it recently in articles where they burn books, and this is what we're talking about. They soon burn people. So you're
Yep.
exactly right, Steve. You're right on the money with this, and we do need to support each other. Hey, look, Alex Jones is someone I don't have a relationship with. He's one of the few in the independent media that I don't call up and say, hey, what's going on with you? I have a relationship with most. That's irrelevant. That has nothing to do with anything. Alex Jones needs to stay on the air, and they need to stop screwing with him. And we all need to stand in support of Alex Jones. When Mike Adams was taken off YouTube, I stood in support of Mike Adams. And I don't care if you like someone or not. You're absolutely right, Steve. We need to support people's right to free speech.
Yep. And here's the thing, Dave. I can only say this: who has the most to gain by taking Alex off or me off? Somebody said, I got an email from somebody in the government saying, boy, you really have a lot of enemies. Yeah, I know I do. But a man is known more by his enemies than by his friends. And in the world of talk radio, I got to tell you something. I mean, seriously, I was one of the first guys on 25 years ago talking about all this stuff. It's not bragging. I'm 67 years old. That means that for almost, 40% of my life, I've been talking about this stuff. 11 books, countless now appearances on talk radio. I think I've been on talk radio. And please, I don't count the exact numbers, but I used to do years worth of show, 3 hours a day. So when you did that, and you just count the weeks in a month, and you do that for 10 months, you get up there, and then I was all over the place. But here's something that I think is important for people to understand. The history of the world will verify this statement. And I've said it on the air before, and I'll remind everybody, this isn't me, this isn't original to me, it isn't me trying to be cute. But when someone knows the living God, has a personal relationship with Jesus, that man is a, quote, man of God, or a woman in that position, a woman of God. But I really was praying about, Lord, sometimes it gets to me being on talk radio. That's why I got off and I passed my torch on to Hawk, who's on, Thursdays and Fridays. And by the way, just to give Hawk kudos, he's the only guy I know on talk radio, Dave, and because of his calling, I mean, he absolutely is fearless. He talks about Jesus Christ in every single situation. He doesn't back down, and he has had bad guys in his backyard. He's had knocks on his door from, quote, Orientals at night at 2 o'clock. This guy has been on the firing line for over 15 years. So when I call disheartening emails and stuff, the statement that I want people to understand is this: no word of God spoken by a man of God is ever received by the people of God at the time it's given.